Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very pleased that I'm able to present to you here tonight the only hope there is for Western Canada. More and more people realize, as we discuss it all over Western Canada, that the Conservative Party hasn't solved any problems and has become the Central Canadian Party that it always was. And therefore, we have to communicate the hope of something better. Most people are taxed to death and tired of it. Most people realize we're a multicultural chaos, and they're tired of that. More and more people realize that Western Canada has the potential, and we have the resources, and all we need is the will to build a better government, cheaper, more efficient, closer to the people governed, with lower taxation, one language, and a future for Western Canadians. If there was an older alternative, many people would have found it by now. Let's just go over a little bit of brief history, because it always helps to know a little bit about the past, to know how we got where we are, and to know where we're going if we continue on the same path. First of all, how did Canada acquire Western Canada? Does anybody know? Well, it was purchased by the Government of Canada from the Hudson's Bay Company in 1870. The consequences of which were that nobody in Western Canada actually got a choice in joining Canada. We had a rebellion actually in 1870 under Louis Riel, and another one in 1885 under the same person. That was on the part of Métis, and who at that time became concerned that they had no choice in the way their land was being divided up. It was like they weren't even here. Well, there weren't very many Europeans here of non-mixed origin at the time. Well, there are now. Things have changed, but the Constitution hasn't. The situation of Western Canada is really the same as it was in 1870. We're bought and paid for. It really doesn't matter how we vote, because our numbers are insignificant in the political process of Canada. And many of us realize that it comes from the history that I just mentioned. Now, after 1870, there was another major event that many of us studied in school, and some of us have forgotten, and that was the railroad, the Canadian Pacific Railroad. It was built between 1867 and 1885. It finally reached Vancouver Island in that period of time. It was built so that the Americans, who had just finished the Civil War, wouldn't look forward to taking over Canada. They wanted to make sure that British Dominion stretched from sea to sea so those damn Yankees wouldn't come up and take it away. And as a result, you can say that Canada was always a reaction to the United States. It was never built by the people's choice in any real sense. And historically, in 1870, on March the 9th, there was a speech by a man called John Sebastian Helmken in the BC legislature that was the best defense of Western separatism I have ever heard. It was the articulation of all the promises that Canada made, wouldn't keep them, and how British Columbia alone would have been better off with its own tariffs, keeping its own taxes, and keeping everything it needed for itself within the province of British Columbia. Not at all. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. We used to publish that speech because nobody could really improve on it. It was, as usual in the 19th century, in impeccable English, spoken with very sincere and obvious conviction, and well aware of all the facts. You don't find politicians talking like that anymore. It's all cliches, innuendos, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and isn't he a bad guy? Vote for me. That's how it's run today. And of course in Quebec, there's one other feature, and that is, how much do you want me to pay you for your vote? That's how you get Quebec on side. So historically, Western Canada never had a choice in joining Confederation. Quebec actually did through its legislative assembly. But British Columbia, for instance, was told that it was going to join Confederation by Lord Granville, the colonial secretary, basically divesting itself of the responsibility for its former colony. They had no more money to send the British Navy out to Esquimalt to patrol the Pacific Ocean. They were basically hard-pressed for cash, and they had to get rid of some of their territory. Now, that's a pretty brief history, but it is actually founded in the most fundamental facts. Let's look at another question of brief history of Western Canada constitutionally. I've covered that in a way. But it was always the case that there was no regionally elected Senate. You remember that, we'll talk about the brief history of Western separatism in a moment. But that's been a reason why Ontario has always run the country with the help of Quebec. Those two provinces are all that ever count or ever will count. Now, we used to know this, and we used to see that many Western Canadians understood this. And then they said, well, Preston Manning actually said, well, the West wants in. The West wants in. The West wants into Parliament, and we want a voice, and we're going to organize the people of Western Canada. And he stole many of the separatist supporters that I had gathered in 1980. For those of you who don't know me, I should have started off by introducing myself. My name is Doug Christie, and I founded the Western Canada Concept in 1980. And from 1978 to the present, I've been advocating publicly Western independence. Because frankly, it has been and is the only hope for Western Canadian culture, land, and civilization. Let me give you a brief history of the Western separatist movement. I say it started in 1978, and as a matter of fact, it started in 1974 when I published a letter in the Times Colonist articulating the grievances of Western Canada and saying, I don't think there's another solution but independence, and is there anybody interested in contacting me about this? And a great many people from all over British Columbia, because that letter was just published in Victoria, contacted me when we formed what was then known as the Committee for Western Independence, which changed its name to the Western Canada Concept in 1980. And in 1978, I took a tour of Western Canada and spoke all over Western Canada, and I actually sold these West Power certificates, which were a method of raising money. And some of those West Power certificates are still around. They were like a declaration of independence. People paid some money to help support the cause. It was a great movement at the time. It was actually funded by a bunch of people who gave up their time, including me, to take cars and trucks and vans all over Western Canada. And we had a wonderful experience of the kind of resurrection of hope